Well, guys, why don't we go ahead and get started? My name is James Atwood. I'm a partner with Atwood & McCall, and on behalf of all of our panelists, I would like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for our panel discussion entitled How to Revive Your Business and Come Out Stronger Than Before. I think these are topics that are on everybody's mind, given all the circumstances we've been through the last 7 months here, not only in our state, in our country, but the entire world. So today we're going to divide our panel discussion into 4 general topics, those being profitability and cash flow, marketing and sales, operations, and then legal and tax issues. We have 3 panelists here with us today. I'm going to introduce them by name and then give each of them 30 to 45 seconds to tell you a little bit about themselves. First, we have Sean Schoenmaker, who's a business coach with Action Coach.
That's right.
Victor McCall, who is a law partner of mine and a partner here at Atwood & McCall.
You're a lucky man.
Most days that's true.
That's right.
And then we have Chase Murphy, who's a tax partner with the accounting firm of Baker Tilly. So Sean, why don't we let you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll just go right down the line.
Sure. So Sean Schoenmaker, like James said, I'm a business coach. I work with a lot of different small business owners, basically a lot of different assets, facets that we'll look at in their business. But ultimately, typically, they're looking to make more money is kind of the biggest thing. But that could take the form of marketing and sales strategies, which we'll obviously talk about today. It could be working with their team to help improve efficiencies, or maybe just having plans in place and just utilizing all different areas of business. So yeah, help business owners do that stuff, and I'm glad to be able to share some thoughts and examples of things we're doing with clients. So,
hi everybody. I'm Victor McCall. I'm the other partner of Atwood & McCall. We have a 6-attorney law firm, and we specialize in business law, litigation, trust and estates, and asset protection. My personal practice is I'm a recovering trial attorney, and I do merger and acquisition work, I do contracts. I try and keep my business clients out of trouble, and that's what I do. Chase?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Chase Murphy, as James said, I'm a partner at Baker Tilly, CPA firm based out of Chicago, but with a great presence here in Texas. Thanks to a ton to these guys for letting me join today. I specialize in entrepreneurial tax work, a lot of entity structuring and M&A planning, with some correlation to the practice these guys hold here. So look forward to sharing some strategies with you guys today, and hope to add some value. So
perfect. Thank you all, panelists, for joining us. Let's jump right into the first category, profitability and cash flow. Obviously, with the things going on in the world, when businesses shut down and slow down, cash flow becomes an issue. So maybe you guys could tell us a little bit about what you've seen your clients do to pivot and deal with these issues.
John, you want to start?
sure, yeah. So obviously pretty broad topics, profitability and cash flow, certainly multiple different areas that we look at. And so some businesses focus on some strategies, some focus on others. But in terms of profitability, there's sort of 5 main areas that we'll look at to increase profitability. There's lead generation strategies, there's conversion ratio strategies, there are number of transactions, so looking at repeat business, also the average transaction value, and then as well as a profit margin. So strategies that can go into any of those 5 areas that can help a business, and depending on what type of business it is and what scenario they're in, you can obviously emphasize certain strategies to either increase lead generation or maybe just do better with the leads that you currently have, working on your sales process, or it could be sticking with current relationships you already have and looking for repeat business. That's also another area of marketing that you can do in the business. And then in terms of cash flow, 4 main areas we look at for cash flow. We'll look at your accounts receivable, accounts payable, inventory, and then ability to have credit. So these are all, again, 4 different areas that your business could benefit from in terms of cash flow, the amount of cash you have in your bank account. And so again, depending on the type of business, the industry, we'll focus on different strategies within each of those areas. So yeah, a lot of different options there, but those are kind of the basic areas that we would look at to make a business either more profitable or give them better cash flow.
Yeah, I'm happy to tack on a little bit. I think obviously a large component of cash outflows for most business owners are taxes of various sorts. And so, with the different economic stimulus packages that have been provided thus far, CARES Act being a hot topic earlier this year, won't get too far down into most of the details there, as I assume most of the participants and attendees here have at least dug into that in some level, but would certainly advise if you haven't to go back and consider what type of economic stimulus you might be eligible for. I'm sure most of you guys had explored PPP loans and otherwise, but there's a lot of other opportunities with potential loss harvesting to carry back operating losses to prior years, or potentially take advantage of some disaster losses that can offset historical tax liabilities and get that immediate cash infusion back into your business. And then a lot around payroll taxes. So that's not my deep level of expertise, but ultimately there's a lot of credits and incentives and deferral opportunities around payroll taxes that will allow you to retain more cash currently, and kind of almost have a interest-free loan built into some of the deferral mechanisms. So a lot of opportunities there. I'd say the one thing I'd mention around all that is that encouraging most of my clients, while take advantage and do the analysis and make sure that you've done the diligence to see what you're eligible for, but then move on and get back to business. Ultimately, let's not get too lost in trying to find every penny available through all these different stimulus packages that can be daunting task and ultimately lead you down roads to where you end up just spending time, effort, and money that doesn't come back from an ROI standpoint. So analyze it, get with your experts, get with other resources that you have deploying those types of functions for you, and then get back to focusing on running the business to peak efficiency and driving profitability through the old-fashioned way, so to speak, I guess. So,
Yeah.
So I don't know how much legal expertise goes into this section, but I'll tell you about a couple of things that we're working with some of our clients. As an example, one of our clients is a software developer, and he traditionally has sold his software for a flat fee, and it's expensive. It's a $250,000 piece of software. And because of what's gone on in the economy, he has restructured his sales from a flat fee to a payment over time, right? And so it makes it affordable for his clients to be able to do that. Now, with that being said, he now has to have a contract that deals with selling it over time. And what happens if they quit paying? Do they have a right to continue with the license of the software? So that's the type of stuff we look at. So when you're thinking about your own business, think about how you can change maybe how you change your purchase or your sales price to get the cash flow. And another a practical matter that we're doing with clients is we're working with their landlords. At the moment, one of the biggest expenses next to employees, obviously, is the cost of your office, your lease space. And so what we're doing is we're negotiating with the landlords, and we're taking lease payments right now, and we're putting them on the back end. And what that does, it gives cash flow for our clients so they can use their money to keep their business open. And the landlords are glad to do it for the most part because they're afraid they're getting ready to lose their tenants. And so if it's a good landlord, if it's a smart landlord, oftentimes there's a negotiation that can be done with that to help with the cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that starts to hit on a couple examples of where you're impacting accounts receivable and accounts payable. So, for example, one of my clients, we've been looking at how they collect payments. So how can they structure their deals so that they get a little bit more of that money up front? That's one way that you might want to look at contracts. And, if you're having long-term contracts, especially, and you can figure out a way to get more of that cash to you up front, then obviously that's going to reduce the amount of time you have kept that cash outside of your bank account. And by the same token, in terms of accounts payable, obviously we need to be looking at, hey, can we utilize credit cards at a minimum? So we've got 30 or 60 days, however long you have for that credit card. Can you get any sort of ability to negotiate with your suppliers? Again, that's a lot what Victor can do. Can you negotiate the terms? So it's not like you're not going to pay, but you have 60 days instead of 30, or you have 45 days instead of 30, or 60 instead of 45. And so each one of these components doesn't automatically give you tons of extra cash, but if you start adding up a few of these different things, now you end up with potentially tens of thousands of extra dollars in your account a lot sooner, which in and of itself, having more cash actually helps you get more profitable.
Yeah, and and another thought, when we negotiate with clients and people they owe money to, hiding from a creditor is, sticking your head in the sand is not the way to do it. If you talk to your creditors, you talk to them on a regular basis, and you're paying them something, and you're showing that you're making an effort, oftentimes they will give you enough wiggle room to survive. And so that's something to think about. Get ahead of the curve. Don't be afraid, be bold, talk to people you owe money to, and let them know you're in business and you're working hard, and they will, for the most part, work with you.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is just the credit right now. Credit is, all the interest rates are extremely low. I mean, if you're ever looking to take advantage of credit to be able to, put off some maybe immediate payments and give yourself some of that extra cash in the bank account, now is the time. I mean, if you can refinance anything, right? Look into the options, get some quotes, see what you can do to try to push some of those payments to either a later date in terms of getting some sort of a loan, or getting a reduced rate on whatever interest you're paying, because that'll help the monthly debt service, and then obviously that'll give you more cash on a monthly basis. So
Yeah, and I think we've hit on the big ticket items, the rent and some of the APAR and other balance sheet classifications. And I think being the accountant in the room, I'd say we can certainly take a financial statement approach even to some capacity. And so most businesses, those should be kind of the big three or big four, so to speak. But certainly, look at your financial statements. And if you've got a unique business that maybe has a large point on the financials outside of those few areas that we touched on, analyze it and find ways to build some efficiencies throughout whatever that function of your business might be. But you can just, again, look at your big ticket items on your financial statements and try to find ways to address ways to make that process better and more efficient from a cost standpoint.
Perfect. All right. We're just about at the end of our 10-minute allotment for that topic. Let's move on to the next topic.
Okay.
Marketing and sales. And I'll just say, from my own experience as a business owner, how we sell and market has changed dramatically since we can't get together with people as much face to face. So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about how that sales and marketing process has changed, what you've seen clients do to help overcome some of the challenges that we have in this area.
I'm happy to jump out. I guess initially, I think my practice correlates fairly closely with you guys, and then it's relationship centric, and without the ability to get out and make new relationships and meet new folks at large events and things like that, the dynamic has changed significantly this year. And I say that the area I've been most successful is really just kind of going back to basics of individualized relationship building, and that I think one of the advantages to where we're at the moment is that people are yearning for those personal connections and those opportunities to have adult conversations, so to speak. So, in the past, when you were maybe worried about bothering somebody by following up or interrupting their day to day, oftentimes now folks are looking at that and kind of yearning for that opportunity to have those conversations. So just encourage everybody to look back through the Rolodex, so to speak, and start reaching back out to those relationships, knowing that people want to hear from you, people want to have those conversations, and if anything else, just to check in and see how they're doing. And I think everybody has that commonality across the world at the moment. And more often than not, those how you doing conversations turn into, well, what can I help with? And then, action items from there to follow up on. So
true. Yeah, I think as long as you're calling, people you're calling know you care, right? I think that's what you're talking about, exactly. Chase, right? Because they do want to hear from you, right? I can't tell you how many times James and I will block off 2 hours worth of time, and we'll start calling our referral partners, right? And they're really glad to hear from us. And it leads to business, and it also helps us get them business. We're talking to them, and they need something that we don't do, right? They may need your help, right? And so we can send them to our friends. And so it's very synergistic to be able to call. Sure. And they do want to hear from you. You're not bothering them. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, I think especially right now, because it is a little harder to create new relationships, now is the time to leverage current relationships. And there's so many ways you can do that you may not normally think about. Because typically when you think about marketing, what do you typically think about? Oh, I need new clients. I need to go meet new people. But the reality is, 40 to 50% of business is probably repeat business, if not more, right? So if you think about, there's so much opportunity really in businesses that's not new relationships. And now is that time to really get to really focus on the leverage of the current relationships you have. So it could be strategic partners you have, it could be current clients that you have, it could be past clients that you had. Those are relationships that just may not be active. So really going and looking at what can I do to increase repeat business? Those are a lot of opportunities to focus from a marketing perspective. And there's a lot of strategies to do that. Simply making phone calls, right? That's one example. Just following up with people that you maybe haven't talked to specifically. Obviously, you probably have seen it online. There's a lot of emails going out, more emails now than maybe there were, 10 months ago or 12 months ago, because now emails is one of the more popular forms of communication. So really focusing on those prior relationships, looking at, how can you chat with clients and set up their next need, start looking into the future. Hey, John, it's been a long time since we've talked. What's going on in 6 months? I know, we definitely have uncertainty, not for sure we know what's going on, but what do you know for sure is going on? What can we look at that might be a need for you in 3 or 6 months, and set the meeting now? And this is something obviously you could have done 3 or 6 months ago, and you would have had that meeting today. So now is the second best time to do it rather than yesterday. So, ask those questions, really evolve, take advantage of the relationship and that you've already formed, and try to see what sort of other business opportunities there are. Also, if you are doing business or you have any transactions going, it's a perfect time to look at average dollar sale. What are the things you could start to package on, or maybe offer in, or are there other partners you could look to package some things together to really get higher transactions in there as you are already doing the conversations and having the meetings? So, those areas in particular are where you can market and continually make sure you are selling to current clients. I'm not saying that to be in an annoying way, but guess what? People have opportunities. They have needs that they may not be aware that you can provide solutions to. So you have to make sure they do know those things, so that when those do come up, especially right now, again, you can be of service and help as best you can. So I think those are 2 areas in particular that would help.
Yeah, and I think, most businesses have changed in some capacity over the last 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
And so when you think about, former clients or former targets that you had that maybe weren't a fit at the time, or maybe you didn't have solutions for that resonated, the grave likelihood is that their business has changed in a capacity that may not be a fit. Or, again, I think as Victor and I started with, if it's really just based in checking in, I care, see how everything's going, whether it creates an opportunity or not, there's been dozens of circumstances where that conversation didn't necessarily lead to an opportunity, but within weeks or days thereafter, it was something triggers that, hey, let me actually circle back, and there maybe is something that we need to discuss, or somebody to make a connection with. So.
And one of the main things because I work with Sean is our business consultant, and we spend a lot of time with him. And one of the things that Sean taught us early on is the leveraging of time. And what we mean by that is James and I make most of our marketing is to referral partners. That's what we do. We market to people that control clients rather than the individual clients. And not only do we leverage that way, when we go out to lunch or we go out for drinks or whatever, we invite several of our referral partners, introduce them to each other, and now they're referring to each other. So we leverage our time that way, because there's only so much time in the day. And so that's something to think about as far as maybe a way to change some of the marketing that you're doing.
Yeah, I think a couple other things I just want to touch on from like a marketing perspective. The reality is we go sort of, one of our principles is to have a 10 by 10. And that kind of means you have 10 different strategies that are bringing in, say, 10% of your leads in total, which gives you 100% of your leads. But the idea is every business should have multiple marketing strategies in place. So if you don't, now's the time to start trying some new things, right? It's never been a better time to market, because guess what? There is a lot of need out there. It just may not be quite the same as what you're used to. So really looking at what strategies do you have, knowing your numbers. We also say marketing is math. So if you can't point to a strategy that says, hey, look, this one gets me an ROI. So if I invest $1,000, I get $3,000, or if I invest $500, I get $1,500, or whatever that number is. Get those numbers, right? Now is the time to start tracking those, because we don't need to be wasting any money on any strategies that aren't working for you. So looking at all the different strategies that you have, knowing the numbers, figuring out the numbers, and then adjusting, right? So some strategies, like we talked about, since it's harder, for example, to do in-person networking, if that's been your main strategy to get business in the past, guess what? You're going to have to shift, and you might want to shift it to the one that's getting you the best ROI today, right? So those are some of those things you just have to continue to look at and do the numbers on, so you can make the best informed decisions from a marketing and sales perspective. So
what about actual sales to brand new clients that you don't have a previous relationship with? The whole Zoom world, virtual selling, how do you see that working?
Yeah. It's certainly about building trust, as I think is the case with really any industry or any product. I mean, you want to try to find a way to establish trust, and it is difficult in today's day and age without having some of those physical interactions. And so it's about, certainly having credentials and being credible and having other folks that are maybe even willing to help push that across the finish line for you. So when you're making these touch points with existing clients and folks in your network, and always using those as your best advocates to step forward and having that built-in credentialing system by having those warm introductions that are being made.
And it's okay to ask a friend,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
To help you out,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, we do all the time. I mean, we ask
A little too
our,
much. I'm just kidding.
yeah, we do. We ask our referral partners, say, we want you to introduce us to somebody, and that's what it's all about. We help each other. We do a lot of work with Baker Tilly. They do work with us. We send stuff back and forth. Same thing with Sean. And that's what you do. You help each other out, and you should not be afraid to ask for a referral from somebody.
So I was just talking with a client this morning about an hour and a half ago, and he just hired a new project manager for his business. And he had asked some of his, he's in construction. So he'd asked some of his trades, hey, do you know of someone that would be good of a project manager? But he kind of asked it in passing, kind of like we probably ask a lot of referrals. They go, hey, if you know someone, let me know. But in this scenario, he kind of got to the point where he's like, all right, I need someone. And so he went to the certain trade partners and said, okay, I need someone. I know you know somebody, right? Just think about it, give it 5-10 minutes, but tell me who's someone that you know, right? And so sure enough, they gave him someone, ended up being a really good candidate, and now he hired him, right? So, but if you don't have that type of gumption, if you don't have that type of, emphasis on the importance or the need for a referral or something like that, it doesn't happen. Because why? Everyone's busy. Everyone's got their own things that they're looking to accomplish. So, giving it that amount of emphasis and just, really making sure you give someone the opportunity. Don't just say, hey, if you know someone, let me know. It's like, hey, who do you know? And then be quiet. Right?
Be intentional about it, and
Yeah.
you used the term earlier, be bold. I mean, that we should have maybe just titled the entire webinar "Be Bold." I think that'll be the emphasis throughout all the different subjects, I guess.
Yeah.
But,
Being a wilting flower in this day and age means you're not going to survive. That's what it means, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, let's transition and talk about operational. Good discussion, by the way. Operational issues. Obviously, a lot of things have changed. How we do things, how we did things previously don't work now. From a business operational point of view, what are some of the things you guys are seeing and how clients are responding to succeed in this new environment?
That's great. I'm happy to jump in just, I guess, initially. And I'll even leverage ourselves as an example. So I think we touched on a bit ago, looking for idle capacities within your financials and trying to understand, where am I incurring expenses that I'm not necessarily driving full value from currently or able to leverage at full capacity. And so we did that within our own organization. And so we had a handful of resources, particularly on some of the recruiting development front, that has slowed down over the last handful of months as we didn't have the opportunity to be on campus and hire to the extent that we have in the past. And so we've redeployed a lot of those resources into more of a central function around our billing and collection process to help drive efficiencies within our own practice and to help work out plans with our clients that maybe were having some issues throughout the pandemic. And so having those personal touch points and obviously the relationship builders of some of our recruiters correlate nicely into nurturing some of those existing client relationships to come up with payment plans and things like that that make sense for everyone and obviously drove value directly into our business. So that's one example, I guess, that I've seen most recently. So.
Well, to add on what you're talking about, so one of the things that we've done at our own law firm is as much as you can automate, it helps. We ended up changing our billing system, our billing software that went from a very complicated system to one that I can understand, which as everybody who knows me knows it must be very simple. It works really well. It has a great dashboard. And then we've outsourced some of our bookkeeping that we were doing in-house. And so that happens to flow really well with our billing system. And so it's our collections are better. We have better grips on our numbers. Thank you, Sean. Right, Sean. So Sean always goes, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know how to sell, and you don't know when to hire, and you don't know what you're anyway. So if you don't have those type of software programs with your business, you need to spend the money. You need to become more automated. You got to get a hold of your numbers.
You need to invest the money, right?
You invest the money
because you will get a return on that. So
you got to do it.
Yeah, there's so many things you can do from an operational perspective, first and foremost, systems and processes. If you don't have a system, you don't have a process in place, is it going to be done efficiently? Probably not. So, you know, there's no need to bring in a ton of work and then do it inefficiently, right? I mean, you're gonna be taking money out of the bottom line just really quickly. And then obviously, if you don't have, for example, a process and things get messed up, then what happens? You have to redo the work, which is another loss of profitability and efficiency, right? So there's just so many areas that you can improve in terms of your processes and your leverage. We typically look at people in education, systems and technology, testing and measuring, and then delivery and distribution, right? So there's so many different areas that you can look at. Hey, how can we automate? How can we create a process? Can we reduce the steps maybe from 7 to 3 so we have less opportunities to make errors, right? Just so many different ways you can improve that. But I think a lot of it starts with you know, systems and processes. Virtually, to talk specifically about what we're seeing today, numbers. If your team members are working virtually, which they probably are in some capacity, there's got to be numbers, KPIs, key performance indicators. What are they doing on a daily basis or a weekly basis? What are they reporting to you in terms of their productivity or activity? Hopefully both. You know, without those numbers, it's really hard to manage anything, right? So really keeping an eye on those things. And you may not have had those things in place before because you could see them working, or you could see them working jobs or cases or whatever made sense, but now you don't see it, right? Or you can't see it as well. So you've got to increase the information transfer. And a lot of that can come from numbers, KPIs, reports that are coming from team members.
So Chase, how are you guys handling that? 'Cause you have most of your staff is off site now.
Yeah, the
And
entirety
you're
actually.
talking
Yeah,
thousands of people.
Roughly
people,
4,000 people nationally, and you know, crossing over a lot of different teams. And so, you know, to Sean's point, it is about data, you know, these days. And I think that our issue is really trying to maintain a sense of entrepreneurial spirit with our folks while still tracking performance and KPIs and leveraging that data. So, you know, we try to make it as soft as you can, but ultimately a lot of it's just being transparent and explaining that we're in this together. You know, we're here as one organization. And in order for us to maximize value within the organization that we in turn try to return back to our workforce, we need you to do certain things differently. We need you to think of certain things differently. And you know, overall, it's been, you know, very well received. And I think, but transparency and explaining things is particularly generationally, I think a lot of folks, particularly in younger generations, appreciate the context of why we're doing certain things. So, and that kind of segues me to my one other point is just, you know, now more than ever, I think we've got to challenge ourselves to think differently and to look at things through a different lens, and assuming that, well, that's the way we've always done it, particularly in some of our legacy industries that, you know, had this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality that, you know, I've been profitable for 30, 40 years, so I'm going to continue to do those things. You know, now is really the challenge that says that maybe that's not the best way to perform in any context of your business. Yeah. So,
well, the world's definitely changed.
Being nimble and being bold. Back to your point.
Yeah, bold's it.
Yeah,
that's right. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, good. Any more thoughts on that topic? Now on to the fun topic, legal and tax issues.
Tax is my favorite thing to discuss.
I thought it would be.
I'm sure this is why everybody's excited today.
It's like, oh, we all went with
all the cameras are turning on. Everybody's the sense of excitement is just through the roof.
It's not nap time yet.
Yeah.
So
it'll be afterwards, I'm sure.
What are some of the legal and tax issues that we got to be mindful of in this bold, brave new world?
Yeah.
And how do we address them?
So since I'm not planning on contributing too much to this because it's not really my field of expertise, I'm just going to touch on one thing that I think, again, I just talked to a client about this early on because he just brought on a new employee, which guess what? There's a lot of industries that are hiring right now because, well, a lot of people were laid off or they didn't have jobs early on. So now people are rehiring. And one of the things I'll just point out that is definitely important for small business, and I'm not the person that's going to write that contract for you, but it's going to be to have things in place early on about non-competes, expectations on policies in the business, and all of that needs to go into those early on conversations with new employees, even current employees. If you haven't had those conversations, right, do it now. No better time than now. And making sure those things are upfront and in place with your team members allows you the ability to, I'm not going to say, you know, you hold them to be accountable, right? If you talk about what those expectations are, then you can hold them to be accountable. Because at this point in time, if someone's not a profit center for your business, you probably don't need them or want them, right? So just making sure that those expectations are set up front with some sort of document that, again, legally you need to be able to do those things is what I would just stress for business owners. So.
Yeah, so one of the main things that we're looking at because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, we're making sure that all of our new contracts that we draft making sure they have a force majeure clause, which means an act of God. And a lot of old contracts have them. We've had most of ours anyway. What that means is that if there's an act of God or there's something that's out of control, like a pandemic, it can actually be a reason why you can break a contract because you can't perform because of something that's happened. And so getting back to our lease situations, one of the ways we negotiate those, and we've been very successful with them, is that because of the pandemic, we believe it qualifies under the force majeure clause, which allows us to break a contract, renegotiate it. Okay. And so that's really important. And what's interesting is that force majeure clause I've been practicing for, almost 30 years. It's been a boilerplate clause. I mean, no one really even pays attention to it. And all of a sudden it is unbelievably important, and it can make or break a contract of whether or not, one, you have to perform under it, two, you can enforce someone to perform under it. And so that needs to be looked at. And I think that's very important. The other thing I think you need to do is if you have business succession insurance, which means that you have insurance that if you have a fire or something of that sort and you can't, your business is out of business for a while, that the insurance will pay for it. Well, this pandemic, for the most part, does not cover this. Business succession insurance doesn't cover a pandemic. However, there are old policies that may cover it. So if you have that type of insurance, get with your attorney or get with your insurance guy, have them take a look at that, because you may find out that you can get money under your insurance policy.
Great points. Yeah. So I'll add a couple of tax thoughts there, and I promise I won't bore everybody with the nitty gritty details by any means. And one's kind of more of a blanket statement, and I kind of touched on it a bit earlier, in that there's really no entity type, industry type, or taxpayer that has not or should not be impacted by some of the legislation that's come out this year through either CARES Act, economic stimulus programs, et cetera. And so if you haven't reviewed your tax filing positions, either yourself or hopefully with advisors and folks like that you trust, there's certainly going to be opportunities. To what level those opportunities certainly are industry and facts and circumstances specific, but you should be looking and asking those questions. And most people look at it as a kind of a set cost, but really taxes are often one of your larger line items as a business owner or as a taxpayer. So all things to consider there. I'd say more strategically, a couple of thoughts that I would add is really more around valuations and where they might sit at the moment. And so, if you're historically have looked at, or maybe not even have considered more of an acquisitive type position, and if you're looking at expanding operations or even maybe driving synergies among other areas within a particular industry, now might be a great time to look at potentially acquiring targets. And so, leveraging the opportunity that while values are arguably suppressed, or maybe folks are just at a fatigue point that there could be ripe with opportunities to come in and expand your own business through acquisition. And then the second piece of that is, leveraging that from a transitional standpoint. So to the extent that you've got estate planning expectations or, family dynamics that you want to try to deploy on, now might be a great time to look at, well, if I could argue a lower value of my business today, then hopefully at any point in time in the rest of our lifetimes, now might be the point to consider. Do I want to look at transitioning some of that equity or transitioning some of that ownership to my heirs or to others within an estate planning context? So
I think that's in particular a great idea.
Yeah, sure.
Only because that's what I do.
Sure, yeah. Shameless plug for you there. Yeah.
I can't help.
I got one other thought that we're all having to deal with, and that is the change of employees now working from home, right? There's all kinds of bear traps that goes along with that, and a lot of us haven't had to deal with it before. But you got workers' comp matters, you got HR matters. I mean, it's completely changing the landscape, and I think it's evolving. It's a moving target as to how you handle that. So I strongly recommend that you get together with an HR specialist. James and I, we're doing that because we do have attorneys that work from home and paralegals, et cetera. And it changes our responsibilities as an employer. One, to make sure that they're safe. Two, to make sure that they're covered properly with our different insurance policies. And I think it's something that everybody that has employees that are working from home, you need to find those answers out.
Yeah, I'll make one other point to that actually, and I'll leverage some of our own experience here as well. As you mentioned earlier, transitioning an entire workforce
Right.
from having predominantly been in an office setting and I'd say in a contained and consistent environment on a regular basis to being really all across the board in terms of what the dynamic of their work situations might be. And so, not to segue back to operational efficiencies or anything else, but as an owner, being aware of what some of those different circumstances might be for their workforce. And obviously, if there's opportunities or ways that you can try to make those work environments more efficient, then great. But even just the awareness and the touch point and the relationships with those employees is important. And knowing that, again, even within our workforce, we've got folks that work all the way from having nice separated, dedicated office space within their homes and a nice segregation between work and life, to folks that maybe are in a studio type apartment setting that their living room and their bedroom and their work office and everything is now all in one. And so there's not a sense of separation to some of those things. And so the optics of being overwhelmed and overworked and those things can certainly be a deterrent in terms of peak production. And so just being aware of that.
Yeah. And so, and that's a good point, right? Because if a employee is working in a small space and they're dealing with, say, medical records, right? And you have the HIPAA laws and their computer's up all the time and family members are walking by or friends are walking by and they're seeing very confidential information, as an employer, right? What type of liability do you have with that? I think you have a lot of liability. So how do you deal with that? Right. I mean, so that's something that, again, get with your counselor and your experts and have those type of discussions.
Perfect.
Yeah. One final thought, just be legal.
Yeah, be legal and be bold.
Just be legal. You'll have
Be
less.
boldly legal.
Bold legal.
Be boldly
That's right.
legal.
That's right.
Well, we got just a couple of minutes left. Have you guys seen clients make any interesting mistakes that we might want to talk about so we could avoid them?
Yeah, I guess initially, I think earlier on, probably more so than as of recent, but having a little analysis paralysis, as I'd call it, and alluded to it a little bit earlier, in that while these are all great planning opportunities, and you certainly want to make sure that you vetted some of these things out, I'd say not to such a level of distraction or a level of paralysis, as I mentioned, to where you don't get back to focusing on growing the business, executing, providing top quality service, top quality product. So you want to do your diligence, but not to a point where you're paralyzed by it. And I think early on, particularly with the overwhelming amount of information coming from PPP, and first of all, what does the application process look like? And then what is now forgiveness? We get so many folks that spend so much time, effort, and resources trying to understand every nuance of the forgiveness mechanism, for instance, that you spend hours away from just growing a practice, and it'll actually be a detriment to you in the long run. So that's probably one of the areas I've seen mistakes.
Yeah, so I meant to kind of touch on that for operations, and that is just time utilization, right? And that's a perfect example of where you might be focusing on the wrong stuff. Like, yes, you need to look at it, but if you're spending too much time on it, or the time it's not worth, then you're making less money, right? Or you're not putting your time and effort into the marketing or the sales or the things that are looking at those operational ways for your team to run more efficiently, right? So really making sure you're keeping an eye on the types of tasks you're doing and the value that it has, because some people start focusing on the wrong stuff. And I mean, I help clients with this all the time. I'm like, hey, do we need to spend that much time on that? How much time did 10 hours. Okay. Should we spend 10 hours on that? Oh, actually probably should be 4 or 2. Right. And so just being mindful of where that time is going. Cause if you're not, with all the information flowing around and TV out there, I mean, it's easy to lose focus. So you got to make sure you are tracking those things, looking at them, and being smart. So,
yeah. So, I don't really have a comment about a client that's made a big mistake, but I will say that I think that especially in this day and time, I think that training is super important, and that can be self-training. What I mean by that, you need to read voraciously. Okay. As example, I was reading this morning, some of McKinsey Consulting, the world's largest consulting firm. They have phenomenal papers that have been written about certain things that they see going on with certain trends. And that's just an example, and that's online and it's free. And so educate yourself and just, make hard decisions and, be bold.
Take action.
Take action.
All right. We are out of time.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for taking the time to join us.
So I want to just let people know that, obviously we covered a lot of different stuff and everyone's got their own little disciplines here. I'm willing to do a complimentary 2-hour strategy session. So we talked very generally. Honestly, we could probably talk about any one of these topics for 45 minutes. So, we kind of tried to cover some of the top level things. But if anyone on the webinar wants to get more specific into the specific strategies that might work for your specific business and your specific situation, I'm willing to do a complimentary 2-hour strategy session. So if that's of interest, just type into the box or let us know, or I guess we'll get in touch and we can make that happen. So. Bam.
All right. And if you want to reach out to any of our panelists, feel free to do so.
Someone's raised their hand.
They were waving.
I think it was a thumbs up. I think.
Oh, the thumbs up.
Certainly, thanks for
All
having
right.
me, guys. I
Tiffany
appreciate
gave
it.
us a
Thank
thumbs
you.
up.
Thank you for coming. Take
Bye,
care, guys.
guys.
Have a nice
Thanks.
afternoon.
Be safe
And bold.
and bold.